Hi there, Yeards. It's another episode of Yearbook University. We're still talking about the purposes of a yearbook. In particular, today we're going to be focusing in on covering the year and just how we go about doing that. So some of our content goals for a yearbook, coverage in the inside of the book should be complete, balanced, relevant, dynamic. Again, you should be taking notes for your homework. So when we talk about complete coverage, we want to include all activities, all sports. We don't want to play favorites for anyone. We don't want to overcover one sport and undercover another. We need to make sure that it is showcasing complete coverage. Now, that being said, some sports do a lot more on our campus and have a lot more presence. For example, basketball and football. It's kind of a big deal with a lot of things surrounding it. Unfortunately, some other sports, like tennis, don't have as much going on. So we try to balance it as well as we can, but understandably, some sports have a bigger pull because they have a greater amount of students involved, and they have a greater amount of students involved with watching it as well. When we talk about balance coverage, we want to think about balancing the amount of times that we're showing students in a book. So our goal is 3 times coverage. If we get more than that, great, but we want to make sure to kind of spread it out evenly so everyone can be shown and represented in their book. This can be done through either their photography or quotes. We like to show images of students as part of their coverage, their 3 times coverage, but a lot of times just having that student voice is great in the book as well, and it's better than nothing. The book also needs to be relevant. It needs to represent what the students are actually talking about, their year, their lives. It needs to pertain to now. It can't be a book that students have no association with, that it isn't talking about what is actually going on or what they actually think or feel or like. The book shouldn't be a color version of a book produced about 10 years ago. It should be definitely this book this year. When we look at dynamic coverage, we want to make it as fun and engaging as possible for our viewer. We want to involve our viewer and reader as much as possible in the publication. We should not cover stories in the same way year after year. If we cover an event like Kickback, it should be a new and different way of telling that story. So when we're looking at making the coverage balanced and relevant, coverage can be done in both a visual and verbal format. About 70% of the publication is going to be done in the visual. So that's your photographs, things like the spread design, the theme pages, the visuals that are throughout the book, the engaging things. 30% of that publication's coverage is going to be in verbal, which is the written, things like stories, captions, clever headlines, stuff like that. That's done in the verbal variety. Both verbal and visual should contribute to the theme, which we learned about yesterday in the video. And a theme should be consistent throughout the entire book. Even though the yearbook is made by a lot of different students at different stages, it should look like one cohesive product. It's a collaboration between all the individuals. It should be consistent throughout the pages. It should look like one unified book, not a bunch of individual pages bound together with a cover. It should look like a cohesive document, and that's for your viewer's sake as well. If it is kind of piecemeal together, it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't have the same flow page to page. So when we talk about visual variety, a book theme should be consistent with small variations from page to page. We talked about that yesterday. Photos should be the main point of variety on your page and in your spread. You don't want to have too much visual variety because it makes for kind of exhausting looking at your page, because it's like pew, 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 all those different things, and your eyes like, what? So don't do that, but add in some sprinkles here and there. Visual variety is great because it makes things interesting. A single shot, we'll talk about different kinds of visual varieties as far as shot layout. So on the next page, come here. Oops, email. A single shot is one image used to tell a whole story. A series is like 3 or more shots showing kind of a sequence of events, like so before, during, after, or like a progression of movements. A collection, talking about visual variety with photography, is a group of related photos, each telling kind of a different aspect of the story. So maybe it's a photo from behind the scenes of the drama production, on stage, another photo that's showing the image from the sound booth, or another image from the theater stands. So it's showing related photos, kind of telling different aspects of that one unified story. COBs are cutout backgrounds, which is removing the background and just leaving the subject. Really fun. They do take a little bit of time, but they're very cool. And then a mortise is a smaller related photo that overlaps or is an insert into a larger photo. We don't use mortises yet. We could, and I don't see them as frequently in yearbooks, but let's take a look at what those actually look like on a spread. So here we can see this is one of those large group photos. We also have some smaller group, thinking about numbers when we talk about large versus small. We're talking about numbers of students shown in those group photos. This is an example of a mortise. It's a little photo laying over some bigger ones. You have to be careful with mortises because you can easily cut out important information. And technically, if you can lay a mortise over another photo, then that photo can be cropped in tighter because you have excess information. So here we have a photo collection talking about different viewpoints from the same story. And then down at the bottom we have those COBs, those cutout backgrounds. Here's another example of photos on a spread. So you can see large dominant, but it's a small group photo. And we have a lot of variety as far as the placement of the photos and the orientation. We've got horizontal, we've got vertical, we've got some cutout backgrounds, smaller cutout backgrounds. So there's a whole lot visually that's going on that makes it really interesting for your viewer. Not all the same photo with the same amount of students and the same kind of orientation. That would be very boring. So when we talk about verbal variety, we're talking about headlines, captions, quotes, and quick reads. Verbal elements report the specifics, like the facts, figures, opinions, and descriptive details. They tell anecdotes about the people and the experiences that the readers like to hear. The best writing focuses on people and uses their quotes to tell much of the story. Again, we're reporting about what's happening. We're not telling the viewer what happened. We're telling the viewer through the voice of the students. We shouldn't be reporting saying, spitting it out in our own words. We should tell a story through the quotes of the students that were part of that story. It makes it more engaging, you get more coverage, and it's more authentic with the viewer voice. To establish credibility, you always want to indicate your source, cite who said what quote, and give specifics for those people, like their year at the school, first and last name, that sort of thing. So here we've got some different kinds of headlines. We'll get into headlines in more detail, but you can use things like alliteration, play on words to kind of break up the monotony of headlines. We never do a headline that's just football. Okay, that was first year advisor mistake. I did that. Don't do it. We always want to make up something clever. If it can tie into the photo, oh my gosh, even more beautiful. We always want to have that visual verbal connection. So we want to read the copy, figure out what the story is about, and hopefully we can tie the story in with the photo with the headline. So we have cellos to chill. So here you can see cellos, and I think they maybe had ice cream afterwards. I can't tell by the photo. But again, you always want to talk about what is going on in the story and hopefully tie in the photo for your viewer. Make that visual verbal connection. Another example of some headlines, again, play on words. They've got their theme tie-in, which is and some more. So theme specific coverage down the side, really like that. You do want to cover your theme and your coverage, tie it in as well as you can with maybe headlines, photo coverage. We talked about that yesterday in the previous video. 1B, watch it again if you need to. Quick reads are shorter stories or extended quotes, usually off to the side about a certain topic. This is what we call an infographic, which gives statistics about a topic and usually has a quote assigned to it, a student talking about one side or the other of a statistic. And again, it's giving those polls, those stats, giving those quotes, giving authentic student coverage, and again, we're covering the year in different ways. We're not just doing big, long, extended stories. We're doing it with small quotes. We're doing it with little percentages and graphs and all sorts of interesting things to kind of break it up and tell it in new and different ways. So another example of quick read, another example of infographics. So we use infographics a lot for statistics, lots of numbers. It's good when you do infographics though to try and get student voice integrated in. That way it isn't just wasted coverage where there isn't any student voice assigned to it. You can easily integrate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students in this one infographic as far as coverage is concerned if you just get a quote associated with the number or the stat or whatever. So Capture Life, a comprehensive yearbook, documents life both inside the campus and out. They cover key areas as student life, academics, organizations, sports, people, and index. So student life, it should be focused mainly on the school, but should also talk about life outside of school. So it's everything having to do with the life of a student. So that involves both inside school activities and outside school activities. Note that on here they've got a lot of in-school activities, but they're also focusing on other things as well. With a chronological yearbook, you still cover these key areas, but yet you integrate this coverage into a chronological, a time sequence format. So rather than organize the book based on student life, classes, sports, things like that, instead we go, okay, this is the week of Wood Creek and we're talking about classes, we're talking about what kids are doing after school, maybe there's a sports event. So it's done rather than organizing categories, you're organizing it by date. You can break it down in weeks. Some people do it for every 2 weeks. Some people do it daily, which sounds exhausting. But there's lots of different ways to chronologically organize a book. So here we can see we have an example of academics. Not quite sure, but again, they're covering lots of different topics having to do with student life, organizations, with clubs, things like that. Sports, we've obviously got basketball, but again, this is a chronological book, so they're integrating in other kinds of coverage throughout. So you can see this is January 10th. They had a game, Del Oro versus Rockland. This is Rockland High School's yearbook, which we're friends with Rockland, so we can ask them about it. So in the people and reference section, again, a yearbook, part of the purpose is it's a reference document. We want to integrate some interesting coverage, student stories, student life stories, maybe some sports coverage inside the people reference section. That way it's not too boring, because otherwise it's just face, name, face, name, face, name, face, name for pages. And it doesn't give your audience a reason to visit those pages unless those are their friends or their class. If you give them a reason like interesting stories and coverage, then you're guaranteed that your audience is going to go to every single book in the page, which is really what we want. An index is another great opportunity for coverage. We don't ever want to just have the index with the letter and then all the students covered on those pages. We want to put additional photos, student voice, coverage on those pages. Again, it's free real estate that we can integrate in and achieve that 3 times coverage that we have that goal for. So planning for all that coverage, how do we keep it all straight? Oh my gosh. Well, it takes a lot of planning. In general, we stick to what's called a page ladder. So the page ladder talks about what is going to go on each spread in the book. So we break it down into general subject, and then we talk about specific topics. We might include what deadline it's assigned to and the people or person in charge of that specific spread. So here's an example of the page ladder. We'll talk more about this in class and we'll show you our specific page ladder. Even pages are always on the left. Odd pages are always on the right. Books are printed in what we call 16 pages, which is called a signature. That has to do with taking this huge piece of paper at the plant and then they fold it, fold it, fold it, fold it. And when they take that huge piece of paper, they have 16 pages on that piece of paper. And based on how they fold it, kind of origami it, then it makes what we call a signature. And then they cut the sides off the signature and bind the spine. So that's why our ladder is organized into signatures, because that's how the printing plant prints it. We should always kind of stick to our ladder. It's how we keep track of the organization of the book and we don't get off on our numbers and make sure to have enough pages for everything. We post this on the wall. It's also on Yearbook Avenue. We don't want to leave any pages blank unless we are planning to reduce the size of our book. So I know I talked wicked fast for this, but I was trying to keep it under 10 minutes. Hopefully you got some great takeaways about different kinds of coverage and how we go about tackling, telling the stories of the year. And I look forward to seeing your notes tomorrow and talking with you more about the yearbook. Bye guys. Have a great rest of your day.